What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Murphy. What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Murphy, and it's a especially great privilege for me personally today to talk to the one and only Michael Uslan, creator of the essentially the creator of the Batman film franchise. Who now, Mr. Uslan, I've read your book, read it 12 years ago when you first published it, and it's a wonderfully inspiring book about how you have this love for Batman and you made this vow to sort of make the films and eventually got there. Now we know we have a limited time today, so I we can't really go through the whole story about how you started watching the 60s TV show and all that sort of stuff and all the way up there. But anything you'd like to tell us in the brief time we have to so maybe sum that up a little bit, I suppose would be great.
Yeah, sure, Ryan. First of all, I'm really happy to be here with you today, and love reaching out to fans. I grew up a fanboy. That is me. I am a comic book geek. My mom said I learned to read before I was 4 years old from comic books, and by the time I graduated high school, I had a collection of over 30,000 comic books dating back to 1936, which filled the entire garage of our house. My dad never once got his car in the garage. I was at First Comic Con back in the early 1960s in a Fleabag hotel in downtown New York, where 200 of us gathered. Um, probably the greatest thing that happened at that Comic Con is I got to sit and talk to Bill Finger. And Bill Finger told me and my friend Bobby as to the real story, the whole story of how Batman was created. And that was amazing. And I met Bill through my first mentor in the comic book industry, an amazing man and writer named Otto Binder. Otto was the primary writer of Captain Marvel and the Marvel family during the Golden Age. He created Mary Marvel, he created Black Adam, the Marvel family. And then he went over to DC, where he contributed a little bit, such as co-creating Supergirl, the Legion of Superheroes, Brainiac, Crypto, really an amazing guy. I was lucky enough to grow up just an hour outside of New York City in an era when almost all the comic book companies were there. And I learned, because I was one of the early members of comic book fandom as it was organizing, I learned that most of the creators since the late 30s through the 60s, the writers, the artists, the editors, they either lived in New Jersey, Manhattan, or Long Island, striking distance. So I was able to reach out to them and go to their homes to interview them, and then go to the offices with my friend Bobby of every comic book company that was there at the time. And that's how I got to meet people like Joe Simon, who was editing the Harvey superhero line at the time. And I got to meet the head of the Comics Code Authority, Len Darvin, and John Goldwater Sr. over at Archie, who was one of the three founders of MLJ Comics. I got to go on the DC Comics tours on Tuesday afternoons. I got to meet Stan Lee when I was 11 years old. So, it was an amazing time and an amazing place to be. When I got to college, which was Indiana University in Bloomington, it was the early 1970s, and they were offering a new concept. It was an experimental curriculum department in the College of Arts and Sciences. And they said if you had an idea for a college course that had never been taught before, you could bring your proposal to a panel of deans and professors if you had the backing of a department on campus. And you could pitch it, and if they agreed to it, you could teach a course for 3 hours of credit on campus. Even though I was only a junior, I was only an undergrad, it still gave me the opportunity to do that. And I saw, wow, this is a great way to incorporate my passion, my love for comic books, my knowledge of the history of comics. So I created a course, comic books as a legitimate American art form and superheroes as our modern day mythology. And I got the backing of the folklore department, and it was teaching that course that got worldwide publicity. And that's a whole story. But as a result of the massive amount of publicity, I had TV cameras in every class I taught, reporters. Um, I was on radio and TV talk shows. I got a call out of the blue one day from Stan Lee, And that began my lifetime relationship with Stan, where he changed from my idol to my mentor, ultimately from my mentor to my friend and creative associate. Um, Saul Harrison, vice president at DC Comics, called me, thought what I was doing was so innovative that he and Carmine Infantino flew me to New York City, offered me a job at DC Comics, which was a geek dream come true. And I got to work summers at DC. They put me on retainer while I was still in school. But I got to know everybody and they got to know me. And they realized I had a passion for comic books. I had a passion for Batman. I had a depth of knowledge. Um, and that's what literally, Ryan, opened the door for me to have the balls to walk in 1979, in April of 1979, and say, I want to buy the rights to Batman. I want to go out and make dark and serious Batman movies and show the whole world he is not the funny pot-bellied Pazap Wham guy that everyone was laughing at on TV. And and these are the steps, because otherwise you go, well, how does a kid in his 20s buy the rights to Batman? It's impossible. It's inconceivable. And only if you have this knowledge of the context of the times can you even begin to grasp how I was able to pull that off. And at the end of the day, Ryan, and I'll conclude with this as a very long answer to a very short question. Um, I was able to buy the rights to Batman when I was a kid in my 20s because I was the only one on the planet Earth who showed up. Even the president of DC Comics, Saul Harrison, who was very, very fatherly toward me. He had mentored me into the business. He said, Michael, for God's sake, don't do this. I don't want to see you lose all your money. Don't you understand that when Batman went off the air on television, the brand became as dead as a dodo? That's a quote, Ryan. He said, Michael, nobody's interested in Batman anymore. That's how I got the rights.
I mean, that's a incredible story, and of course, you could go on for hours about it. But to my telling my audience, buy the book, The Boy Who Loved Batman, and you have a new book out now, Batman's Batman, which is sort of a sequel. It's a great story. There's and just a lot of the stuff that you did and all that sort of stuff. But as the franchise has gone on over the years, and the first film came out in 1989. We're now in 2023, so it's been about 34 years. What has been some of the stuff that you've like that you've seen that you've appreciated and not appreciated? Like, I'll phrase it this way. In 2011, when I saw you at Wizard World, Chicago,
Yeah.
you said at this time there were only the Burton, Schumacher, and Nolan films. That was all there was. And you said, well, the Burton films I appreciated because they were like the Bob Kane stories, and the Schumacher films I appreciated because they were kind of like the Dick Sprang. Well, maybe appreciates is a strong word for the Schumacher films, but the Schumacher films are kind of like the Dick Sprang kind of stuff where they're jumping on giant typewriters and stuff like that. And these Nolan films that are out now are kind of like the Frank Miller comic books. And I've always wondered in the decades since then what you would have to say about the two franchises that we've gotten since the Snyder films and the Reeves film that just came out. What you might correlate those two in terms of the Batman comic books.
I went back not long ago into our old files that are in storage and dug out my first correspondences with the studio, which date back to 1990, pushing for us to be able to do a story that focuses on Batman as the world's greatest detective. And over the years, the pushback always was they were so concerned with toys and games and Happy Meals
Mhm.
that I don't think anyone was too interested in sacrificing stuff being blown up, gimmicks, um, merch, to focus on something that was that cerebral and that part of the Batman mythos. So I have waited 33 years for Matt Reeves, the Batman, and was all I could say was, to me, it was worth the wait. And we just experienced it the other night at the Dolby Theater, where the movie was shown with a symphony orchestra on stage accompanying the soundtrack. And it was mind blowing. It was mind blowing. How that score did not receive an Oscar, I have no idea. I have no idea whatsoever. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So that is my answer to that. And all I could say is fasten your seatbelts for the Batman Part Two. Um, we've had Todd Phillips, a person who I now consider a genius, who did Joker and we just wrapped Joker 2. Um, he completely revolutionized what a quote unquote comic book movie can be.
Mhm.
It was important. It was cinema at its best, because to me, cinema at its best becomes a mirror of our society, held up to our faces, whether we want to look into it or not, warts and all, and a commentary that I think was so needed on the fact that as a society, we've become so polarized. We've lost our civility. We talk at each other. We don't talk with each other. We've ignored issues of mental health. And clearly, it's all tied to gun violence. And that commentary, so brilliantly executed and acted and written, was amazing. And without saying too much, um, Joker Folio Do is going to revolutionize what a comic book movie can be all over again. It is going to be daring and bold, and that's absolutely amazing. So, for me, the beat goes on. You bring in, hopefully, uh, filmmakers with visions, who have a love for and understanding of a character, a knowledge of a character, and at the point the studio gives them the go ahead, I always like to describe my role as chief cheerleader, just wanting to support them to the nth degree, as best as I can. So I love the fact that so many great filmmakers get 2 or 3 films to play around with and to
Mhm.
develop a character. And one of the most unique things about Batman, Ryan, is because he has no superpowers. People find it so much easier to identify with him than with Superman or the Hulk, etc. And in a sense, he's not only a symbol, he's a bit of a cipher, insofar as you can project your own feelings, your own philosophies, your own politics onto Batman. The one true Batman over all these decades is very simply the one you were first introduced to at whatever age you met him, whether it was a comic book, a cartoon, a graphic novel, a movie. Um, that's your one true Batman. And he is the only character in all of comic bookdom that is so malleable and can exist like that. And you can see different interpretations of him, because the comic book did exactly the same thing over the decades. There are so many different interpretations of Batman in the organic, authentic comic books themselves, that gives the filmmakers a large degree of free reign to execute their own visions.
Mhm. Wow, that's a great answer. And so I just we can work towards a conclusion here, because especially because I want to actually talk to you for a couple minutes after you after before you have to go. But the uh you mentioned the Batman Part Two, and I know you cannot talk about present things that are presently in production, but I have a question I think you'll be able to answer, which is just that as involved as you are, like are you getting like the script notes as they're coming in? Are you fully versed on what's happening with the Batman Part Two and everything like that? Like are you working with Matt? Are you all that going on like right now actively?
I once again describe myself at this point in time as the chief cheerleader. And that's truly what I am. That's truly what I try to be. Uh,
Mhm.
Batman is so important to me from a level of passion, which is, by the way, where the title of my new memoir, Batman's Batman, comes from.
Mhm.
If I could take a minute, when we were pitching the 1989, what would become the 1989 Batman movie, we were pitching it in 79, 80, early 80s. It took 10 years from the time I bought the rights to Batman till we were finally able to get a Batman, serious and dark Batman movie made. Every single studio turned us down. Everyone, every minor studio operation turned us down. Every major production company turned us down. They told me it was the worst idea they ever heard. You can't make dark superheroes. You can't do serious comic book movies. You can't make a movie out of an old television series. We finally got to the final studio after having been turned down by everyone. We're at that meeting, and I pitched my heart out for my dark version of Batman. And at the end of it, the guy says, Michael, you're nuts. Batman will never be successful because our movie, Annie, hasn't done well. This is now the early 80s. I said, are you talking about the little redheaded girl from Broadway who sings the song Tomorrow? He said, yeah. I go, what does that have to do with Batman? He said, oh, come on, Michael. They're both out of the funny pages. That was my rejection. And then he turned to my partner, Ben, who was my dad's age. Ben, a legend in the business. Ben had been the executive vice president of MGM in its Tiffany years. All divisions reported to Ben. He was chairman of their film selection committee. He put together movies like Ben-Hur, Dr. Zhivago, 2001, Gigi and the musicals, signed Elvis Presley to MGM. And he turned to Ben and said, Ben, you and I go way back. Look, if you guys really want to make a Batman movie, we'll consider it. But it's got to be that pot-bellied funny guy from TV, because that's the only Batman audiences will remember and love. And I said, no. And with that, he pulled his chair up in front of me, leaned in, and said, son, that's when I knew I was in trouble, when he called me son. He goes, son, better to have a movie made than no movie at all. And I looked at him and I said, no. After that meeting, we were on a bench on the studio lot. My head was down. I was at the lowest ebb. We had just gotten the final rejection from the last studio. And with that, Ben turned to me in a fatherly way and he said, you know, Michael, isn't it ironic that our last no came from you? He said, you know what that makes you? I said, yeah, Ben, an idiot. He said, no, 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 no. He goes, you have this vision for Batman, this dark vision that you believe in your heart and soul is the right vision because it was the vision created by Bill Finger, Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson, and you believe fully in that, and that's what the world has to see. He says, Michael, you just gave up a chance to do your first big movie. You just gave up a lot of money in order to protect Batman. You are Batman's protector. You are Batman's defender. Michael, he said, you are Batman's Batman. So, Ryan, that's my role. My role is to be the chief cheerleader, the protector and defender to the best that I can, and to just try to be Batman's Batman. That's it.
That's fantastic. And folks, I mean, thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to obviously to the Batman Part 2, to Joker Folie à Deux, and to the Flash. You can touch on that. The Flash coming out with Michael Keaton. Everything Batman related, we're always looking forward to. And Mr. Uslan, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. And yeah, thank you very much.
Well, Ryan, before we go, my mentor, Stan Lee, always taught me one thing very clearly. Michael, whenever possible, get in the damn plug. So let me say that The Boy Who Loved Batman, which was followed by Batman's Batman, I've now done on an Audible books. And I had the chance to narrate both of my books, which was a ton of fun. And I'm proud and super excited to tell you that The Boy Who Loved Batman is now being turned into a Broadway play by the Nederlander organization of New York City. I couldn't be more excited about it. Um, wow, it's just incredible to think that my story, my Batman journey, will wind up as a Broadway play. Has just been really, really amazing.
Absolutely. And if I'm in New York, well, I'll definitely go see it myself. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Michael Uslan, my hero, my personal hero, is here with us today. And thank you very much for watching. What did you think of the interview? And leave your comments in the section below. And as always, thank you for keeping it real.
Thanks, Ryan.
What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Murphy.